Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. Peace in the Middle East for now. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas now in effect. What does President Biden have to say? A brawl in New York City between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protesters. Jewish residents in the city speaking out after being attacked. What do they have to say? House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she has ideas about how to put down a mask rebellion by some Republican lawmakers. We'll tell you what she's considering. Police are leaving Seattle after a series of laws that restrict police authority. The president of the Seattle Police Union talks about what it means for the city. And the man suspected of killing a young woman in 2018 claims he can't recall how he committed the murder. Prosecutors point to his own confession and surveillance video as evidence. And Israel and Hamas are officially in a truce today. The U.S. Secretary of State says he plans to meet with leaders on both sides following the ceasefire. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken plans to meet Israeli and Palestinian leaders to discuss recovery efforts following the ceasefire. He tweeted he'll be traveling to the region in the coming days. The news comes after Israel and the Hamas terrorist group agreed to a ceasefire Thursday, ending an 11-day conflict. Egypt mediated the truce, which took effect early Friday morning. And President Biden Thursday pledged to provide support to Israelis and Palestinians following the truce. For Israel, he mentioned the Iron Dome system, which helped destroy Hamas rockets fired into the Jewish nation.
I assured him of my full support to replenish Israel's Iron Dome system to ensure its defenses and security in the future.
He reiterated that the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist groups. Biden also said the U.S. will help provide humanitarian relief for the people of Gaza and assist in reconstruction efforts.
We will do this in full partnership with the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, the Authority, in a manner that does not permit Hamas to simply restock its military arsenal. I believe we have a genuine opportunity to make progress.
Palestinians in Gaza took to the streets early Friday morning to celebrate the ceasefire, and Palestinians in East Jerusalem gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But Israelis in Tel Aviv expressed mixed feelings. One resident supports the ceasefire, but says it doesn't solve the fundamental problem.
The whole problem is about what is going to be next, and unfortunately, the situation did not change much compared to what it was before.
Another resident says he thinks Israel's defense forces should have hit the terrorists even more.
I think that the considerations for the ceasefire are extraneous considerations. I think that this ceasefire in this case came too early. In my opinion, there is no strategy, there is no order, no thought.
At least 230 Palestinians have been killed during the conflict, along with 12 people in Israel. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
A brawl broke out in Manhattan last night after the ceasefire was announced. The NYPD made multiple arrests, and there are reports of pro-Palestinian protesters throwing an explosive device at a crowd. Here are the details. Demonstrations erupted in New York's Times Square on Thursday between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups. An Israel supporter referred to the Gaza ceasefire announced that night after an 11-day war sparked by rocket attacks from Hamas.
I love that there's peace. I'm hoping for peace. I hope that it's long sustained. We'll see how it goes. Really hope that the peace stays.
Police broke up crowds and made arrests. A pro-Palestinian activist refers to the ceasefire.
We don't want a ceasefire. We want Palestine to be free.
Pro-Palestinian protesters hurled an explosive into the crowd in Manhattan's Diamond District. The NYPD's arson investigation squad is looking into the incident. According to Fox News, a pro-Palestinian group attacked 2 New York City residents in a brawl caught on camera. The 2 residents, Amit Skornik and Snir Dayan, served the Israeli Defense Forces a few years ago. When they saw pro-Palestinian protests going on, one of them put an Israeli flag on his motorcycle in the form of silent protest. As they approached the crowd, his friend told him in Hebrew to put it away, but someone from the crowd heard them. Dayan told Fox the person ran back to the crowd, and about 10 seconds later, 10 people were charging toward him and his friend. He says they punched them during the attack, and 30 seconds later, police arrived, but the group continued to try to attack them. Then police arrested Dayan, and they held him for half an hour at a local precinct, then drove him to his Midtown apartment. Dayan told Fox News, "Control the protests. The moment they get violent, stop them. Don't tell me to stay inside like a prisoner because you can't control them. They wanted blood. I could see it in their eyes. They must be stopped." Dayan and his friend reportedly said even though they were attacked, they didn't plan to hide their Jewish identity in New York City. Border Patrol officers arrested a group of more than 30 Mexican nationals crossing the border in the desert near the Arizona-New Mexico state border. Officials say that desert conditions are deadly for border crossers this time of year.
John Modlin is the interim chief patrol agent for the Tucson sector. He says agents on horseback arrested 32 Mexican nationals who disguised themselves in camouflage and illegally crossed the border. He posted a picture of the arrests on Twitter. Earlier in the week, Modlin posted that a group of migrants surrendered Border Patrol agents, and 105 of them were unaccompanied minors. The arrests come as illegal border crossings continue to climb from already high numbers. Officials worry this may lead many migrants to perish in the dangerous desert conditions in the area this time of year. Border Patrol officials from the Tucson sector held a press conference last week, warning migrants about the risks of crossing the desert. They were joined by representatives from the Mexican and Guatemalan governments. They had a clear message for border crossers.
Don't do it. The desert is vast and it's treacherous.
Juanita Molina, director of the Border Action Network, says migrants continue to cross the border despite the dangerous conditions, out of desperation. Border Patrol agents say thousands of migrants have died trying to cross the border in Arizona. Sometimes only skeletons were found. The surge of migrants trekking to the border, coupled with unaccompanied children and the intense heat of the desert, border agents from the Tucson sector are preparing for a busy and deadly summer.
One West Coast state recently passed new laws restricting police authority. As a result, police are moving to other jurisdictions. A police union leader talked to NTD about why this is happening and about the implications for safety.
Police are leaving Seattle in droves. By the end of May, there could be as many as 300 police gone from the force. That's according to the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild, Mike Solon.
We're a third officers down in the size of the department, a third. You can't recover from that. It'll take decades. I've predicted we could possibly lose 400 to 500 people. Hopefully that's not the case. I don't want to see that. In fact, I want to recruit more people. I'm losing members here.
On May 18th, Washington State Governor Jay Inslee signed 12 bills into law limiting police authority. Washington police are now banned from using chokeholds and no-knock entries. Before last year, Seattle's police department had previously spent 10 years reforming their tactics.
Mayor of the city of Seattle, the president of the city council, rolled out a public relations campaign applauding this agency as being the model reformed agency. And I'm fearful that due to this hyper-focus, hyper-scrutiny on the profession of law enforcement, how can jurisdictions recruit quality human beings to do this difficult job? None of those bills really address how this will impact crime.
Anti-police protests have continued for a year since George Floyd's death. Solon tells NTD that politicians are appealing to the loudest group.
Stop inserting politics into public safety. As you know, several of these council members, the current ones, ran on a platform in 2019 to get elected on pro-police, pro-public safety platforms. And what's stunning is that our politicians are still listening to the activist crowd, that small group, yet loud group, that control politics in this city. That small activist crowd is dictating everybody's public safety.
He says there's only one result to expect with fewer police in town.
Picture a more lawless Seattle, where people's public safety interests will be impacted in a negative way. And I've mentioned before, and this isn't alarmist talk, it's reality. Crime will visit people's doorstep. It's just a matter of time when that really starts to impact the majority of the citizens, and I hope it doesn't.
Despite the Washington state government's new laws, Solon says a majority of Seattle residents still support local police.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she may need to take further action to deal with a mask rebellion by some Republican lawmakers. She says she has no immediate plans to update House rules to reflect new CDC guidelines on masks.
Pelosi says she may ban Republicans who won't wear masks from coming to the House floor. She says they have facilities in the gallery where members can vote. Pelosi says some Republicans haven't gotten the vaccine and others won't disclose their vaccination status, so she needs to protect the chamber.
We have a responsibility to make sure that the House of the Representatives chamber is not a petri dish because of the selfishness of some not to be vaccinated.
Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is one of the Republicans who signed a letter to Pelosi. They're asking her to update House rules to match new CDC guidelines that say fully vaccinated people can stop wearing masks. McCarthy led an effort Wednesday to have the Office of the Attending Physician update its mask-wearing guidance. That got defeated on party lines. A group of GOP lawmakers came to the House floor on Tuesday without masks. Some were fined and others were issued warnings. Pelosi says she's not ready to give up the masks until all members are vaccinated.
Unless people are vaccinated, we have to continue to wear masks in our meetings and on the floor. And so that's what we are doing.
The maskless representatives were told that future violations could come in at $2,500 each.
On Capitol Hill Thursday, the House passed a nearly $2 billion funding bill to enhance Capitol security. It barely passed with just a single yes vote dividing the yeas and nays at 213 to 212 votes. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more from Washington, D.C.
This Capitol security bill did pass along party lines, but 3 Democrats did join Republicans in opposing it. Republicans say they aren't opposed to more security around the Capitol, but they're concerned that they don't know where exactly to spend this money yet, since investigations into where security is lacking is still ongoing. Some Republicans also say they're afraid this could permanently militarize Capitol Hill.
Permanent security changes buried in this nearly $2 billion supplemental bill. That some of these permanent changes are within my committee's jurisdiction, and my committee hasn't held any hearings to review or examine these changes.
He's referring to the $200 million dedicated to station the National Guard around the Capitol. Also included in the $1.9 billion bill are reimbursements for the cost of responding to the attack, building repairs, security-related upgrades, and body cameras required for all Capitol Police officers. Most Democrats were eager to pass it.
We cannot wait in order to be able to effectuate security of this Capitol for all who work here and all who visit here.
Republicans agree on additional security measures, but say the House Majority Leader jumped the gun by bringing the bill to the floor before a bipartisan deal was met.
Support for the Capitol Police must be provided. But we do not need to make premature decisions before the ongoing security assessments are complete to commit funding that goes well beyond the scope of January 6th or authorize programs without any debate.
Joining Republicans with a no vote, 3 progressive Democrats, Representatives Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, and Ayanna Pressley, had different reasons. They say the bill doesn't address underlying threats of white supremacy and disinformation. They also say the bill is premature, but blamed this on Republicans for blocking a January 6th commission. The commission bill did pass the House Wednesday, but both bills likely won't pass the Senate. Even top Democrat Senator Patrick Leahy hasn't endorsed the spending amount for this new security bill. The National Guard is still stationed around Capitol Hill right now, just for a few more days until May 23rd, but they could be back in the future, staged around the Capitol as a quick reaction force. That is, if Senate Leader Chuck Schumer can convince at least 10 Republicans to vote for this bill without making any changes first. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
President Biden's nominee for Deputy Administrator of NASA testified before a Senate committee. She agrees that the U.S. has to be careful when dealing with China and its growing space power.
What are your thoughts on China's growing power in space, and does it concern you?
China has made their goals very clear to take away space superiority from the United States. So we are right to be concerned. When you add the other concerns of intellectual property theft and aggressive behavior in space, I think I support the Wolf Amendment, as it's called. It's the law. NASA will continue to follow the law. It's there to ensure that the U.S. thinks very carefully about any kind of engagement with China.
Melroy is one of only 2 women to ever command a space shuttle. She spent 2 decades in the Air Force and as a NASA astronaut before taking on leadership roles. Hurricane season doesn't start until June 1st, but experts say it will likely be another busy year in the Atlantic. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, known as NOAA, released their official Atlantic hurricane season outlook with 13 to 20 total named storms expected. Of these named storms, NOAA forecasts that between 6 to 10 will be hurricanes with winds of at least 74 miles per hour, and 3 to 5 major hurricanes with sustained winds of at least 111 miles per hour. Academic and commercial meteorologists have also predicted an above-average season for 2021, but it's not as busy as 2020 because of an end to the La Niña system that promotes storm formation. The 2021 hurricane season is already off to an early start, with a storm expected to form off Bermuda this week. The CDC is investigating outbreaks of Salmonella infections in multiple states. Contact with backyard poultry could be to blame. Various state public health officials are also investigating. According to the CDC, over 160 people have been sickened in 43 states. No deaths have been reported, but more than 30 people have been hospitalized. The CDC is urging people to know the risks of keeping live poultry and familiarize themselves with simple measures to stay healthy. And just ahead, Pennsylvania joins a handful of states limiting their governor's emergency powers. And we visit a sculptor's studio in New Jersey to discuss the value of art and how it can unify and uplift people. That and more on NTD News. Florida Governor Ron Desantis might be hinting at a 2024 presidential run. He spoke to a ballroom full of his party members in the swing state of Pennsylvania Thursday.
In the state of Florida, with me as governor, I have only begun to fight. Thank you all. God bless you. Thank you.
It was the Republican Committee of Allegheny County's annual Lincoln Day dinner. DeSantis spoke for half an hour to resounding applause, but didn't drop the hint until his last line. A Pittsburgh area pastor was more blunt when praying before the meal. He said DeSantis would make a great president. The man charged with killing a University of Iowa student in 2018 confessed to the murder and led investigators to her body. But according to police testimony Thursday, he said he can't remember how. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Officer Pamela Romero testified that Christian Bahena Rivera initially denied he had ever seen Molly Tibbetts. He was interrogated a month after her disappearance from her hometown of Brooklyn, Iowa. Bahena Rivera eventually admitted that he had driven past Tibbetts 3 times while she was running on July 18, 2018, and had described her as attractive. Within hours, Bahena Rivera led investigators to the cornfield where they discovered Tibbetts' remains. But he wouldn't, or couldn't, explain the details of the murder.
I went to ask him, Mr. Rivera, please just let me know, give me more details, how she got into the car, what happened to her, what did you do to her? His answer was, I brought you here, didn't I? So that means that I did it. I don't remember how I did it.
Prosecutors have used the partial confession and surveillance video to build their case. 26-year-old Bahena Rivera faces life in prison if convicted. The fatal stabbing has inflamed anger over illegal immigration, since he was a Mexican national living in the U.S. illegally. Bahena Rivera's defense tried to cast suspicion on others, including Tibbetts' boyfriend, and residents who had been investigated because of their past behavior toward women. They're expected to argue that the confession was false and coerced after hours of interrogation. Bahena Rivera has stated that he followed Tibbetts in his car, got out, and started running behind her.
It was a black Chevy Malibu. Initially, when that information was passed on from the officers reviewing the video, it was described as a black Chevy Malibu, model year 2008 to 2012, with chrome mirror covers and chrome door handles.
Tibbetts attempted to use her cell phone to call police, and the two started fighting before he blacked out. The next thing he knew, he was driving in his car. He saw Tibbetts' earbuds on his lap and discovered her body in his trunk. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Pennsylvania became one of the few states in the U.S. to cut back on their governor's emergency powers. The decision could drastically change the way disasters are managed in the future. NTD's Don Tran reports.
People in Pennsylvania voted in favor of two constitutional amendments. The First Amendment allows the state's General Assembly to pass a resolution to expand or terminate an emergency order from the governor. The second one limits a governor's emergency order to 21 days, unless the legislative committee votes on a joint resolution to extend the emergency order. Pennsylvania's House Speaker Brian Cutler said he's glad people made their voices heard.
But ultimately, our Constitution is clear. The people are the ones who are sovereign and give government the power. And I think we saw that result yesterday on the elections.
Over 2 million people voted on the two amendments, and more than 120,000 votes were cast in their favor. Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf was criticized for his emergency orders. Some of them include sending kids home from school and shutting down too many businesses. For example, he allowed coal power plants to stay open, but closed coal mines, which led to power plants running out of resources.
Not having that input from the legislators and from the citizens, I think, severely impacted the early management of the pandemic. And so now I think going forward, we'll have that voice in the room on behalf of the people.
The amendments cannot take effect until the state certifies the election result, which could take until early June. Meanwhile, Governor Wolf signed a renewal of the state's disaster order related to the virus pandemic. Don Tran, NTD News.
A container ship the size of the Empire State Building has made it into the harbor of New York and New Jersey. The Marco Polo arrived at the Elizabeth Port Authority Marine Terminal Thursday. The Bayonne Bridge in Staten Island will be raised to a clearance of 215 feet for the ship to pass through. The Marco Polo is the largest container ship to ever call on any East Coast port. The ultra-large cargo ship is expected to set 7 North American big ship records over the next 11 days. It heads to Norfolk, Virginia next. Art can act as a universal language and bring people together. But how can an artist achieve this goal? NTD's Christina Kim visits a studio in New Jersey to find out how one figurative sculptor does this.
This 25-foot bronze sculpture is called the Oracle, and it'll be here on display at the Rockefeller Center until June 29th. According to the artist, the installation is based on mythology, narrative, and mystery. But it's receiving mixed feedback online, with some saying there are better representations of African culture and art. We speak to a classical figurative sculptor for his insight.
Sabin Howard and his team work at a studio in New Jersey. He's a classical figurative sculptor with more than 45,000 hours of experience. He says the Oracle isn't exactly the same as his type of art, but he's happy to see a figurative piece. He believes it'll spark dialogue about how art fits into a public space.
And I think that that is the beginning of a new road that we can all begin to have a conversation about.
Howard is currently working on a 58-foot-long World War I memorial. It tells a hero's journey before, during, and after the war, highlighting the emotions and the humanity of the experience. It's set to be revealed in Washington, D.C. on Memorial Day weekend 2024. We spoke about his philosophy on art, beauty, and the sacred. He described the earth. When you look from afar, it looks like one single unit. But when you zoom in closer, you see it's composed of many complex pieces. The process repeats itself all the way down to the microscopic level. Depicting this structure through art shows how humans and the world are interconnected. That is sacred and unifying.
That idea is the concept of the sacred, and that idea itself is the concept of beauty. Those two elements elevate us as human beings and remind us of what we really are and what we can be.
Howard's art focuses on visual depth, proportions, anatomy, structure, and design. He says his artistic education allows him to identify and break down these elements and put them together in a rich way. This way, his work can touch something below the surface and move the viewer from the mundane to the sacred. It makes the piece interesting, even for people who aren't into art.
And that's something that has been lost in the last 100 years. The art has deviated from the visual and gone more towards the conceptual and the book that you read about that art. It needs to return back to the visual, because visual art is first and foremost visual.
Howard is a traditional artist, but his art lives in the modern day. He references live models while he sculpts, which he believes will elicit a fresh, visceral response from viewers. Howard says if humanity looks at the world in a more holistic, less divisive way, we would have more room for unity, creativity, and productivity. Christina Kim, NTD News.
A pool on a river. It sounds kind of strange, but after more than 10 years of crowdfunding and testing, it's starting to become a reality in New York City. Designers of Plus Pool want to build a 285,000-gallon public pool on a floating island in the East River. They've been given the green light on the project by the city officials. It's shaped like a plus sign to have separate areas for children, sports, swimming laps, and lounging. The pool will have layers of filtration to make the water safe for swimming. Designers say it will also clean the surrounding river. The project, which is estimated to cost more than $20 million, still needs more funding. Coming up, California's cherry season sends crowds to local farms to pick their own cherries. It remains popular even as lockdown eases, and some have decided to make it a family tradition. More on that here on NTD News.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
%90 of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
On the sunny Pacific shore of California, a privately owned radio station broadcasts a weekly show warning of the dangers of communism. The show particularly singles out the CCP, or Chinese Communist Party. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
People come to Santa Cruz to enjoy the ocean and sunshine. However, several Americans living here are working hard to deliver their message about the other side of the ocean.
He just made one offhand comment about Xi Jinping, and all of a sudden, he's in the process of losing everything.
It's a place full of lies. You know, you could say that same statement about every country in the world if you want.
KSCO is locally owned and operated. The president took ownership of the station in 1991. The station's broadband reaches a third of California's real estate and is accessible online. And the station has over 30 programs. They started a new program in September called China Uber Alice.
The purpose of our program is to let people know that communism, and Chinese communism in particular, is not a friend to the United States.
The hosts talk about U.S. and China relations as well as human rights abuses of Chinese citizens.
And I have no bones saying that. And I think a lot of other people are afraid to say that. Okay. I'm not afraid to say it. I think the CCP is evil. Evil.
Brainwash.
I understand why the Chinese government reacted the way it did.
I'm talking about it's a long term. Even I left China.
The China Uber Alice program usually starts with an anecdote from Amy Howe, who spent 10 years imprisoned in a CCP labor camp. She says if they don't talk about what China was like before the Cultural Revolution, nobody will know the damage the CCP has inflicted.
The next generation, they don't even know about. So I think I wanted to talk about those stories. I just don't want to bury it forever,
Howe said they received phone calls from listeners as far as Australia and New Zealand.
Even you get in a free country, sometimes I have a nightmare. I wake up and say, so glad I look everywhere. Oh, this is America,
1949.
That's correct. Right.
And that mind control has been in effect since 1949.
The show title, China Uber Alice, is a reference to a Nazi slogan.
The Nazi anthem, which was Deutschland über alles, which meant Germany over all. The idea that the Chinese Communist Party would like to see itself as being the dominant power in the world, it would be China over all, essentially.
China has more naval ships than the United States Navy now, right? So that's a threat.
The station's audience have spoken positively to the hosts for their show.
They've been saying that they like the idea that we're focusing on what China is up to around the world.
Listeners can tune in live every Thursday afternoon, 2 to 4 Pacific time, or anytime on their website. Reporting in Santa Cruz, David Lamb, NTD News.
It's cherry season in California. Some farms allow for locals to have their own cherry picking experience. Here's NTD's Eileen Eng with more.
This popular farm in Brentwood draws crowds every year for its annual cherry U-Pick.
Here at None Better Farms, people can pick cherries off trees. They're priced at $3.50 per pound, and people must pay for everything they've picked.
It attracts people of all ages.
I loved eating them, but I also loved picking them.
I loved eating them even more. So our first time was last year. We came, it was really the beginning of the pandemic, and it was the first thing that we could think of to do that sounded actually fun.
The Schreiner family picked 5 buckets in an hour. They intend to give some to friends and make pies and jams with them.
The best ones I liked were
like the darkest ones.
The ones I liked were like the ones up high.
Why did you like the ones that are higher?
Because like they're darker and they're more juicy.
We like the freshness, and usually we pick it like when it's in season.
For others, it's their first time cherry picking.
I feel excited. I guess we'll go and find out what it's like.
For over 150 years, this family-owned 75-acre farm has been providing fresh fruits and vegetables to the community.
Ready to pick right now are corals, mainly. The champagne coral cherry. It's a dark red cherry, almost purple, crunchy, really sweet. It's one of my favorites.
Howard has been the owner for 2 years now, after taking over from his grandfather. He suggests picking cherries from the stems so that they will last longer. Howard says the only way to find one's personal preference is to take a bite. No reservations are needed to pick cherries here, and they open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
The Discovery Channel wants to send someone to the International Space Station next year. The network is casting for a new show called Who Wants to Be an Astronaut? Contestants will compete for a seat on the first fully private human mission to the ISS. The rocket is set to launch in 2022. Discovery says you don't have to be a rocket scientist to apply. They're looking for regular people who want to share their journey to space with the world. Applicants do have to be at least 18 years old, live in the U.S., fluent in English, and in good health. You can apply on the site space.castingcrane.com. Coming up, an expert warns Congress China is using its access to vaccines to expand its influence in Latin America. New subway cars in Massachusetts malfunction 4 times in less than 2 years. One key detail, all of the problem cars were assembled by a Chinese state-owned company. Stay tuned to find out more. The European Parliament is freezing approval of Chinese investment agreement until Beijing lifts sanctions on EU politicians. They also called for a rebalancing of EU-China relations. In March, the Chinese regime imposed sanctions on several European entities and political representatives, including 5 members of the European Parliament and the Subcommittee on Human Rights. Beijing adopted the measures in retaliation to EU sanctions on 4 Chinese officials and 1 entity over human rights abuses in Xinjiang. In a resolution, EU lawmakers say any consideration of the EU-China investment agreement has been frozen. A veteran German politician who was sanctioned by the regime wrote on Twitter that the China deal is in the freezer and that Chinese authorities shot themselves in the foot. As the world continues to struggle with the CCP virus, an expert warns that China is using access to vaccines to influence Latin America, which may harm the region as well as U.S. interests in the region.
During a Congressional Commission's hearing on China in Latin America and the Caribbean, Professor Evan Ellis warned that the Chinese regime is seeking its geopolitical interests through vaccine access.
China has used vaccine access to induce Brazil and the Dominican Republic to reverse prior commitments to exclude Huawei from its 5G networks. In Paraguay, China attempted to persuade the Abdo Benitez government to abandon Taiwan for a vaccine. And now in Honduras, President Juan Orlando Hernandez now promises to open a trade office in mainland China in order to get vaccines.
China has made Latin America and the Caribbean a particular focus of expanding its influence in recent years. The pandemic seems to be giving China a new opportunity. Ellis said it's very likely that Western companies, including those from Europe, will sell their businesses in the region, giving China the chance to further expand.
It will be absolutely critical that the U.S. plays a central role in cooperation with partner nations in ensuring the region's sustainable economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is crucial not only for the region's economic, social, and political stability, but also in pursuit of hemispheric security and democracy.
China is the number 2 largest trading partner of Latin America, and 19 governments across the region have joined Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. But plenty of such Chinese-backed infrastructure projects have left host countries with regrets. China is also expanding its military presence in the region and selling its state-led authoritarian model.
In other parts of the region, China exports its smart city initiatives, which integrates facial recognition technology with traditional surveillance equipment. Argentina and Ecuador have been recipients of such technology transfers in the past.
Recently, Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke at the annual Washington Conference on the Americas. He promised to stand with U.S. partners in the hemisphere to reject Beijing's coercive economic practices.
Chinese-made subway cars in the greater Boston area are malfunctioning for the 4th time in less than 2 years. A train derailed in March while some 100 passengers were on board, and authorities identified a malfunction following an investigation. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
Authorities in Massachusetts identified a malfunction in the new Chinese-made subway cars earlier this month. That's the 4th time they malfunctioned since they first went into service less than 2 years ago. Chinese state-owned company CRRC assembled Massachusetts' new Red Line and Orange Line cars. The Chinese company will deliver over 400 train cars to Massachusetts over the next few years. This most recent malfunction first started about 2 months ago. Local transportation authorities had to pull all new trains from service after an Orange Line train derailed. About 100 passengers were on board, but fortunately, no one was injured. The trains will remain out of service before engineers find out the root cause and come up with a solution. These Chinese-made trains had 3 other malfunction accidents since they first went into service in August of 2019. Authorities had to pull them from service every time. In September 2019, a door on an Orange Line car suddenly opened while the train was in motion. 2 months later, a new train derailed while it ran back to the maintenance facility. Then in March 2020, a fault with the bolsters again put the new trains temporarily out of service. In May 2019, U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer asked the federal government to investigate if Chinese-made train cars could pose a threat to national security. Massachusetts state lawmaker Sean Dooley suggested that American cities should stay away from the Chinese state-owned manufacturer. He said no one is under the delusion that Communist China is our ally. They have made no secret of their plans for a one-China economy. Dooley went on to say, putting our citizens at risk for a few dollars, especially from a hostile foreign government, is mind-blowing.
An island nation in the South Pacific will cancel a China-backed project. The incoming Prime Minister of Samoa is going to revoke a $100 million port project with Beijing. Samoa's economy relies on farming, tourism, fish exports, among others. It turns to bigger nations for development funding. The Chinese regime was planning to build a wharf there. A local media said the project was in the final stages of negotiation with Beijing, but the island nation's incoming prime minister calls the project excessive. That's because the country already owes Beijing huge debts. The new leader might be able to form a government as early as Friday. Communist China is the single largest creditor in Samoa. The $160 million Chinese loan accounts for about 40% of Samoa's external debt. The U.S. and its allies have criticized the Chinese regime for extending infrastructure loans to developing countries. Beijing could potentially turn facilities such as ports into military assets. That would pose a challenge to the U.S. Navy. Uniqlo is the latest brand in trouble over cotton from China's Xinjiang region. Customs documents show that the U.S. blocked imports of some shirts back in January. That was over concerns it violated a ban on cotton products from Xinjiang, where there's a growing evidence of forced labor. A document shows that one shipment was impounded at the port of Los Angeles in January. Uniqlo's parent company protested the move, but it didn't work. Fast Retailing said it was disappointed by the U.S. Customs ruling.
Coming up, an iconic painting of Copernicus exhibited for the first time at the National Gallery in London. The exhibit also includes the mathematician's book and an ancient handheld model of the universe. And a special needs school combines mental health care with animal companionship. The students there help to look after goats, alpacas, and ducks. All that and more here on NTD News.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Spain's defense minister has implied that Morocco allowed thousands of migrants to enter the Spanish port city of Ceuta as a form of blackmail. That's after 8,000 migrants arrived this week. Morocco has territorial claims over the Spanish enclave.
Spain accused Morocco of blackmail on Thursday over its passivity in the face of a migrant surge into its enclave of Ceuta. The rush began on Monday when Morocco appeared to loosen border controls. Defense Minister Margarita Robles said Morocco had endangered lives by creating the conditions for thousands of migrants to enter. She said, "We will not accept any blackmail, no matter how small, or any questioning of our territorial integrity." Morocco has a territorial claim over Ceuta and Spain's other North African enclave, Melilla. Many see the move as retaliation for Spain's hosting of an independence leader. Brahim Ghali's Polisario Front is fighting for Western Sahara to be independent from Morocco. The Spanish government, however, has sought to keep the two issues separate. But one Moroccan minister suggested they were connected. He said on social media that Morocco had the right to lean back in response to such a reckless act. The Spanish opposition has strongly criticized Spain's government over the situation. The leader of opposition party Vox visited Ceuta on Wednesday.
We are facing a real invasion of our national territory, an invasion directed and planned by a neighboring country, an invasion that has brought thousands, mostly male at conscription age, to our country. Also many youngsters, minors who have been used as human bulldozers by Morocco.
This week, Spain detained as many as 8,000 migrants who swam into Ceuta or climbed over fences. It sent a majority of them back to Morocco. Spain is struggling to handle the 1,500 unaccompanied minors who can't be returned by law until their relatives can be found. Last year, about 2,000 migrants crossed into Ceuta and Melilla. Wednesday saw hundreds of migrants clash with Moroccan police on the other side of the border. Ceuta authorities say that no migrants crossed overnight into the city. This after Moroccan security forces in the neighbouring North African kingdom tightened the border. On Thursday morning, both sides of the border in Ceuta were mostly quiet and the beach deserted. Spanish troops patrolled on their side.
A London exhibition is celebrating Renaissance-era astronomer Copernicus. His theories put the sun at the center of the universe. Over 140 years ago, a great Polish artist painted an iconic portrait of Copernicus depicting his conversations with God.
This monumental canvas of astronomer Nicholas Copernicus is making a rare visit to Britain's National Gallery in London. This is the first time it has ever been shown in the UK. The most famous Polish painter of the 19th century, Jan Matejko, created this artwork in 1873. It was to mark the 400th anniversary of Copernicus's birth. The painting's name is The Astronomer Copernicus, Conversations with God.
This is certainly an imaginary scene. Matejko, wanting to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the birth of Copernicus, imagines this scene of him on the roof at the cathedral at Frombork, turning to discuss with God his discovery. Now, it's very important. Copernicus has already made the discovery. The diagram of the sun at the center of our system is already there. But now, in confidence, he turns to God so they can discuss his finding.
As a devout Christian, Copernicus believed that God created the laws of motion of matter in the most efficient way. This guided him to formulate the epoch-making heliocentric theory in 1543. He wrote it in his seminal work on the revolutions of celestial spheres. According to the British curator, Copernicus himself never clashed with the Roman Catholic Church. Neither did the Church excommunicate him. Indeed, enlightened clerics of the day celebrated his breakthrough. This painting of a genius at work achieved almost instant fame when it was first exhibited in Poland. The Polish artist was considered a national treasure in his homeland for portraying great episodes of Polish history. But his fame has dwindled in Western Europe.
The fact that there are no works by him in this country means that he's not well known here, he's not known at all. And I hope that as a result of this show, it's a name that people will reckon with.
In addition to the painting, the exhibition also includes Copernicus's book and an astrolabe. That's an ancient handheld model of the universe.
French contemporary artist JR unveils his latest art installation displayed in front of the Eiffel Tower. It fools the eye and gives the impression that the Paris landmark stands above steep cliffs. Tourists flock to take photos with the piece in silly poses. The optical illusion shows the tower in black and white with its feet standing between two cliffs. The illusion is viewed perfectly from a certain angle. JR unveiled his latest piece on the day restaurant terraces reopened in France, and Parisians were eager to return to a form of normalcy. He's known for huge format street art and has done pieces around the world. In 2019, he took on the Louvre Museum and made its iconic pyramid disappear through an image illusion. Recently, he created a piece at Florence's Strozzi Palace showing the illusion of a crack that revealed the structure's interior. A school in the UK's South Wales is using animals to help students with special needs. Now students are welcoming 2 new arrivals as part of Mental Health Awareness Week. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
These cute pygmy goats are getting a lot of attention. They're the latest additions to the Headland School in Penarth. Students there help care for the furry friends and say they benefit from having them near.
If you're having like a bad day, like you could just come and you could express your feelings and you could just calm and you can spend time with them.
There are even more animals here for the children to bond with, including alpacas, ducks, and chickens. Action for Children's Headland School educates children with special needs. Staff say the animals are a real help.
Watching our young people with such diverse backgrounds coming down, so like sitting, talking and opening up about like issues and problems in their lives, it's been fantastic, and I think this has been an absolutely huge part of it.
The pupils take full responsibility for caring for the animals. They build their homes, shop for their food, and feed them. Some students report that it's had a positive impact on the rest of their education too.
So before we had the animals and stuff, I was quite not motivated to come to school. I would usually not come in on some days. And now, since having the animals down here, it's boosted my motivation to come to school to look after them.
Ducks, alpacas, and the new pygmy goats have become invaluable classroom assistants, a boost for children's mental health and education. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A rise in nearsightedness could grow worse as children spend more time indoors on devices amidst pandemic restrictions.
Eye doctors had planned to celebrate the year 2020 as the Year of Vision. In other words, 2020 vision. Instead, it will be known as the year that worsened the world's vision. Scientists are attributing this latest health issue to the pandemic. Myopia is also known as nearsightedness or short-sightedness. Rates of it have been increasing worldwide for decades. Half of the world's population is predicted to be myopic by 2050. The length of time children spend viewing digital screens has been exacerbated by the massive increase in remote schooling. This is directly contributing to further increases in childhood myopia. For a child with myopia, distance vision is blurry while near vision remains clear. Eye care professionals now know that the younger a child becomes myopic, the higher their prescription may eventually become. Higher prescriptions are bad news for the eyes. There is an established link between high myopia and the increased risk of devastating eye diseases. Someone who has a prescription of more than 6 corrective units has a 90% likelihood of being visually impaired by the age of 75. These eye conditions are prevalent in highly myopic adults. Cataract, glaucoma, retinal detachment, retinal degeneration, and other ocular diseases. One thing you can change is the amount of time children spend on near tasks. That's those tasks that involve viewing things closer than 40 centimeters from their eyes. Extended periods of time spent focused on short distances contribute to myopia increases. Digital screens have been targeted as the reason. But is it the electronic display itself, or that a child holds a tablet or phone very close for extended periods? While there is some debate, the short focusing distance is more likely the culprit. Even with the digital onslaught, all is not lost. Parents and caregivers can help prevent children from becoming nearsighted. They can also slow down the rate the condition progresses at. A couple of key tips. Spend more time outside, as direct sunlight plays a part as well as the long-range focusing while playing outdoors. Restrict screen time, and follow optometrist-endorsed recommendations in relation to screen time.
More than anything else, don't assume a child can see well. There is no substitution for an examination with an eye care professional. The pandemic has already caused widespread hardship. By acting now, parents can minimize its impact on the vision and ocular health of generations to come.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.